Well, this is my Traxxas ERevo VXL 2.0 upgrade video. So what upgrades have I fitted on here? Well, I fitted my new 20 kilo servos on either side. So I'm going to talk you through that mod later on in the video, and how to set the linkage up so that the servos aren't fighting against each other. I've also changed the shock. I've also changed the springs and the shock oil. I've got rid of the stock ones. At somebody's recommendation on Facebook, I fitted 60 weight shock oil and the purple springs front and rear. Put a link to where you can get those on Amazon below the video should anybody need them. And I've done a video breakdown of taking all of this assembly off and taking the shocks out, refilling with oil, etc., and more to the point, putting them back on, because it's not taking them off that's the problem. It's putting them back on that there can be a bit of issues with. So I've broken down not only the taking apart of the shocks and the refilling with oil, etc., and the fitting the new springs on as to how to do all that, but also more importantly how to fit the shocks back on, because they were a bit of a pig and I've edited out a lot of the child unfriendly language, a lot of the bits that I struggle with, and I've shown you what to do it the easiest way that I can on this. If you do find this video on my Traxxas ERevo VXL upgrade useful, then don't forget to subscribe. Anyway, let's go on with this spannering. Okay, when it comes to doing the front shocks, I've undone the rear two screws securing them. The screws, by the way, on those shock straps that you mammoth in length, not something you're going to have lying around in your toolbox, so don't lose them. I've undone the front ones, undo the 4 screws underneath, holding this cover underneath, 2 there and 2 there. Just held on from top by the 2 screws that I pointed out there, and the same underneath. Okay, now there's a reason for doing the servos at the same time as the shocks. Is that the fact that as I'm working on the underside of the car, it's going to be far easier to get access to the servos at the same time as I'm working on that front cover for the shocks, so that makes sense. With all 4 screws undone, that cover is simply going to slide to the side, put it carefully out of the way, and now my shock. You will just need to pop that front shock out, and you will need to lift the front of the car, take the load off it, and then pop that front bit of the shock out on there. A little bit of pressure, but nothing to worry about. I've had my front shocks in the sink upstairs, drain all the oil out, but before I fill those up, I'm gonna get to work on the servos as the front is nice and exposed on. Now, while you may be thinking unscrew this bit to take the spring off, don't. You can actually remove this cap, this end, and slide the spring over. You'll see a little blue grommet in there. What I did was I put my screwdriver just in there and just push that blue grommet down. You know that when I pull this spring back, I should then be able to push that bit out the way, leaving me free to remove the springs, enabling you to remove the spring in one easy step to fit your new one. Okay, now I'm not teaching you how to suck eggs or sound dumb, but put this old spring well away from the new ones so don't get confused. Come back to it after you made a cup of coffee and refit the old spring. Well, to put the thing back together, simply put the new spring on over the top, slide that cover in from the side, and then you're going to push that blue rubber grommet back down into position. Well, I can only recommend, if you're doing any work on the shocks, upgrade the servos at the same time. Likewise, if you're upgrading the servos, do your work on the shocks at the same time. Much more easy with that central cover and the shocks out the way. To take the cover off the receiver, just 2 screws to undo it inside here, and the whole thing can slide forwards. You can get access to this cover, release the wires to fit into two servos. First servo in, nice and easily. Now I'm going to remove this bracket, the servo arm bracket, from the top of the outgoing servo, which is the one of the defective ones on here. I'm not going to put that on for a second, more on that in a minute. Both servos in place. Nope, I've not done anything on the underside of the car as yet. Next job, I'm actually going to fix the receiver back down so it's not flopping around. But I'm not going to put the receiver cover on until I finally until I've finished working on the servos on the underside, tested everything, just in case there's any issue with the wiring. That would be my tip to you. Okay, when it comes to putting that front shock in, as I said, they pop out of there. Therefore, you're going to need to just put a little screwdriver in there just to lever the 2 plates above in order that you can slide it in, because it's a very tight fit. When you're putting the shocks on, first thing to do, put something underneath the front of the car to take the load off the front and off the shocks specifically. Do not feel tempted to try and put them, as I first did when I was putting them back together, on the top on there. It goes between these 2 pieces of plastic. Okay, when it comes to putting the front back together, I've reshot this bit. Well, you need to get these 2 screws in at the back. Don't put the 2 in at the front first of all, because the thing is at too much. It's because the shock will be too much of an angle and therefore the screw that goes down in is missing the hole at the bottom, if that makes sense, because it's not vertical enough, because the shock leaning that way is pulling the screw slightly that way. So what I'd recommend is leaving them undone at the front, if you can see the positions I've got them resting in there, and then fit the rear too. That seems to be the way to do it. Save yourself a lot of time and a lot of swearing if you do it this way. Screws at the rear of each of the shocks. So I did the same on the rear, and that worked for me there, and then fit the two front ones on the cam arms, because you can just lift the wheel up in order to then align the hole. Very easy to do that. Well, that's my front shocks back in. As I say, much easier to do these two screws first, then these two at the front. When you've got it right, as if you push this cover, it should go down, and the bottom two contact points where you're going to screw into, it should sit flush against the plastic. The back here, got these two screws to remove to release the back at the rear of the shock, these two screws here to release the front of the shock, and this time you've got 4 screws on top to either side to remove this top cover to get access to the shocks. You've also got this rear one you're going to need to remove. With 5 screws removed, just note that none of them virtually the same size as the front ones, then that cover should simply slide off fairly easily. Put that to the side, and give me fairly easy access to get my rear shocks. You're going to need to pay careful attention to the amount of screws in it, as nothing is pretty much the same as anything else, so you're going to need to make sure you keep the screws separate on there. Again, just lift the rear of the car up to take the weight off to remove that shock. Pop the back of it out first of all, and then you're going to need to pop that front out, so it does seem to want to click in. So I guess when we're putting that back in, you're gonna have to put a little bit of pressure to snap that in, and then put the back. I'm gonna fill my rear shocks up with oil. Now I tighten and untighten the shocks. Simply grip them with a pair of pliers, and then put a hex key through. Springs on the rear shocks, same method as before. Gonna pull the spring back, push that little blue grommet down, and then slide this piece off to the side. One of those, you will find the next one's very quick indeed. Going to put that spring safely out the way from my new one. Just a couple of minutes work on rear shocks, ready to go. Coming round to the rear, I've put my 2 shocks in place. I'm going to need to squeeze them quite hard, because they need quite a click to get them to pop in between. You don't want them on top of this mounting point. Again, you want it in between the 2 bits of plastic. Hopefully you can see down there on the side what I mean. Okay, well the next step is to put the plastic cover on. The first 2 screws you're going to want to put in the 2 long ones that go through the top of the shocks and through the supporting bit beneath. There was a bit of wiggling, jiggling around to get those on, guys. Well, now for the tricky bit, because you really want those 2 to keep the alignment, you need those 2 rear screws in before fitting the front 2, or the rear 2 as I would say on here. In order to do this, you're actually going to need to lift the wheel up slightly in order to move the cam over the hole on there and put your screw in. Well, some of the Traxxas has clearly thought about that, as that does line up relatively easy. Just make sure that is nice and tight. Okay, now with the top 2 screws attached to the shocks, now it's time to fit the remaining 5 covers to the screw. I wouldn't recommend fitting them beforehand, before you fit these 2, because if you've got any problem you need to pull out the thing, then you're gonna have to remove all the top plate as well. I hope that makes sense. Well, that is my that is my rear shocks and my front shocks installed. So what I'm now gonna do is remove these 2 covers, so I can finish fixing the Servos bit. Now I've removed those 2 covers. Next thing being, I'm gonna center the steering trim on my transmitter on. No, powered up my receiver on there. Just checking everything is working, and they're both going in the same direction. Just checking the orientation. They're both going in the same direction when I move the steering. The reason why you want to do it like this and turn the power on first without the arms connected, or without the little servo horn connected on there. Tricky how to describe this bit. Right, the reason why I've done it with the servos powered on before fitting these arms is this, right? If at rest, this arm, you put the arm on and it looks to be in place like this, but the servo's actual at rest position with the power on is around here. Then immediately when you turn it on, it's going to be trying to force itself to its at rest position here. Now if that one's at rest position when it turned off is there and not there, then the top one is going to be trying to fight the bottom one before you've even turned a wheel in anger. So they're going to put pressure on the linkage before you've even started out. But by turning the power on, by turning the transmitter on and the receiver on, the servos are now in their stock position. I hope that makes sense. Tricky to get across, but absolutely vital to my mind when putting the linkages back together. Well, the power turned off, but the car line on its back for easier for access. I fit the servo horn back on this screw on this side. I'm now going to turn the power back on to make sure I've got no movement. Okay, just double checking I've got absolutely no movement on there, because that is where that sits now is where I want that horn. Where that sits now is where I want the horn to go to. If you're looking at it, that might sound blindingly obvious, but the position for this is not purely at 90 degrees there, it's slightly out, it's a few degrees out on that side. But you see, if I'd gone and put it just on at 90 degrees without fixing that side on first, then again, I would have been putting pressure on this linkage, which would then be putting pressure on the other servo, and that's the linkage is going on lined up, so I've got it just at the right angle there. I've put a little hex driver through to it to keep everything. Now gently pushing that one down on there, you will notice there that that is at a different angle to that one. Only marginally so, but if you put them both on at 90 degrees, one is going to be fighting against the other and vice versa. The linkage would have been tight to attach, thus therefore you're putting unnecessary pressure on the servo, which would probably lead to a failure at some point. Fingers crossed this won't do. And there's both manual servos back on. My very last job to do is to fit the receiver box. I'm just going to turn the car over, check my new steering mods. Nice quick motion on there. I think that's going to be quite happy with that. Doesn't sound to be straining at all. Fingers crossed, this is a great steering servo upgrade for the Traxxas ERevo VXL. Just do a power check, just check all your wheels are still turning right before fitting that receiver cover on. Then when you put the receiver box back on, make sure this rubber plug is above the easy set button in case you ever need to rebind the transmitter. That's it, all done. Servos installed, new springs and new shock oil in there, receiver cover back on, so we're all ready to go again. Anyway, I hope you found that video of my Traxxas ERevo VXL upgrade useful. If you did, then please do give it the thumbs up, and by all means subscribe. We hope you liked this video. If you did, please click on the circle image to subscribe. And if you hit subscribe, then don't forget to hit that little notifications bell next to it.